During the early 1800s, in a small town in County Westmeath, Ireland, Curran and her 3 brothers wept for the passing of their mother, but united by an unbreakable bond, they overcame grief to grip onto life. But unbeknown to them, 3 curses were about to befall them, each one lasting 30 days and for 30 nights, each one more wicked than the last. And through the bonds of strength, malice found a way in through Aoife, a passerby who caught the eye of Fi's father and soon became his new wife. As time passed, Aoife's contentment for Fi and her brothers grew. They were the people in her husband's life that, as hard as she tried, she could not outshine. And as sibling love and loyalty grew in the light, Aoife's hatred festered in the darkness until her jealousy took the form, something unspeakable, an evil that truly left its wicked mark. And this is Fi's account of the harrowing curse bestowed upon her and her brothers. It is retold from her journal entries, unearthed from the grounds of her former home, proving the remnants of the past horrors live on in that soil and in the air all around us. The torment caused by one of the simplest yet destructive human emotions, jealousy. This is Fi's story. I grew up living in the background of life, finding content with this. My parents ran a public house, and as such, they spent their days tending to patrons who drank until bile and lies left their mouths. Our tavern was a sanctuary for the locals, their escape from the darkness of the mines, or whatever other hell they spent long days working in. I flitted between those gray stone walls, cleaning up spillages and serving patrons and doing my best to avoid those loitering hands and lingering eyes. I wanted to help my parents because, despite the harshness of our circumstances, I saw the adoration that they shared for each other. It was a love that softened all this darkness. My 3 younger brothers, they always felt like my responsibility, but I didn't mind this. I loved my brothers. They gave me a purpose, and they were a great comfort to me, as I was to them. And Ma had enough to deal with, keeping the tavern clean along with keeping Father happy. I sought it upon myself to protect the 3 of them, Connor, Owen, and Rory. I prayed each night for their protection. I only wish that I prayed more, that I'd done more to protect us from the horrors that were about to befall us all. Looking back, I probably took my simple life for granted. It was blissful in its repetitiveness and its loyalty. But then this all changed when Ma fell sick. A patron gave her this sickness. He came into the public house with his eyes as red as fire lilies, and he took 2 sips of his whiskey, and then he fell from his stool, collapsing onto the ground in a puddle of his own sweat and blood. And Mom mopped up that mess, and then a few days later she was rife with the sickness, leaving her a writhing shell of bones and muddled words. And then, with her hand squeezing Father's, she closed her eyes for the last time, breathed her last breath. After that, Father wandered through his days like a lost soul. We were the only glimmer of hope he had left, but still, for a time, he found life hard to bear. The darkness seemed to grasp onto him, and I feared that he would never find the freedom from it. And back then, I had no idea where the true horror lay, or that it would be my father's grief and sadness. It would bring the darkness to us, would lead her to us. It is the bonds of love that make us stronger, but there is something that threatens to gnaw away at this, to devour it to its core, only until poison is left. And for us, this came in the form of Aoife, a young woman who stopped at the public house by chance to shelter from a storm. And I saw the way that my father looked at this woman, in her soaking wet cloak the shade of moss, a woven basket gripped firmly in her hands. And she said that she was on her way to visit a relative in the next town when the storm struck, and my father took an instant liking to her, seeing her as a distraction from his grief. And for a time, the pain faded from his eyes, and a part of his soul returned. They wed that month, and this young woman, who was a little older than me, became my stepmother. My brothers, even with their playful nature, they only showed her kindness, as did I. She made our father happy, so although we all missed Ma deeply, we had no reason to punish Aoife for this. Only Aoife longed for more. She kept her true nature hidden beneath her pleasant smile and the green of her cloak. But as time passed, those signs became clearer. One day when I was tidying our living quarters above the public house, I saw her standing by the fire, something gripped in her hand. I couldn't see it clearly, but I saw her throw it into the flames. The reflection of crimson and amber were shining in her eyes as she watched it burn. It was later that day that I discovered what it had been. Father couldn't find Ma's bronze hairpin anywhere, and she had worn it every single day. The only reason he decided not to bury her with it was because he couldn't bear the thought of parting with it. He kept it on Aoife's dressing table. Aoife claimed that she didn't know what happened to it, and she spent hours searching every nook and cranny of our home for it. And when we were alone, I looked into her eyes, and I saw something shouldn't have been, and as clear as day, the reflection of crimson and amber flames shone within her eyes. And that's when I knew that she had done it, that she was capable of more than what I thought was possible. Darkness always left its mark. I never trusted her after that, and I began to notice more things, to question her motives. One day, Connor fell from a tree and bloodied his knees, and I was tending to them when I overheard Aoife and Father talking in the next room. And Aoife pleaded with him. She has to go. She is too old here. Make her leave. And my father replied, I will do no such thing. I would rather throw you out than make any of my children leave. I comforted Connor, reassuring him that his knees would heal. I didn't want him to share my fears that Aoife had a darkness in her, and she wished to drown us in it. As she walked into the kitchen with Father, his eyes lit up on seeing us, and he rushed over to check on Connor before praising me for my kindness. And that's when I saw the contempt in her widened eyes, and I knew she hated me. I just didn't realize that she hated the boys too. And that night, despite the relentless rain, I caught Aoife sneaking inside. Her dripping wet cloak was covering her face so she didn't have to look me in the eye. I asked her if she would like me to light a fire or to make her a warming brew, but she shook her head, enough for me to glimpse one of her eyes and see the raging crimson and amber flames reflecting within it. I saw the basket in her hands, and I saw a part of her fingers. Free from the cloak, it was smudged in red. I was certain it was not her blood, as she didn't seem injured, but the blood must have come from somewhere. I didn't mention it to her. I didn't think any good could come from raising such a matter, but now I wish I had mentioned it. I wish I had challenged her before it had properly begun. If I'd have known what she was capable of, I would have done more to protect my brothers from her. As difficult as leaving Father would have been, I would have left with them in the night, and I would have never returned. And by the time I found out the true extent of Aoife's malice, it was all too late. The weavings of her actions, they were already in motion. The very next morning, I awakened to Connor's screams from the room next to me, and I pulled my blanket off me, and I jumped to my feet, and it was putting my full weight on them. That's when I felt the horror that now inflicted me. Blistered welts and sores and raging reds covered my skin. I lifted the hem of my nightdress, struggling to find any section of untainted skin. I rubbed at the sores with my nails, desperate to prove that this was one of the boys' jokes, even though I knew they would never be this cruel. And as I pulled my bloodied fingers away and I saw that redness remain raw and raging, that pain seemed to catch up with my mind and I yelled out in agony. And through it all I could think about was getting to my brothers. I fell to my knees and I crawled along the hallway toward their room. And through the door I saw them, their 3 small bodies, each stricken with the same agonizing welts and sores. I took them in my arms and I held them tightly, and they sobbed into my broken skin and I held onto theirs as gently as was possible. Aoife looked at us from the open doorway. She didn't seem surprised by our plight, but she didn't take joy from them either. In her eyes, I saw the regret, but that was short-lived beneath the flicker of crimson and amber flames that raged there. Although it hurt to speak, I managed to mutter to her, "I see the fire rage within you. What have you done?" She tilted her head and in a whispered voice she replied, "I can't punish him for loving you all more, but I can punish you. This is just the beginning." She left, closing the door on my brother's desperate sobs. The pain seemed to consume us, but I tried to soothe my brothers the best I could. I sang to them, soothing tunes that Ma used to sing to us when we were sickly, and this seemed to settle their cries to whimpers. And while they rested, I went into my father's room to find some of Ma's old healing ointments. And while looking for them, I saw this gap in the floorboard, and on dislodging it, I discovered the basket that I had seen Aoife with the previous night beneath it. I pulled it up, careful not to press my fingers against the bloodied fingerprints that smudged the handle, and as I lifted it up, removing the lid, I forgot about my inflictions, and instead I was consumed by something altogether more harrowing. There lay a dead swan. Its webbed feet were twisted together savagely, and with bloodied lines dividing a section of it into 3. Welts and sores struck out from beneath its blood-soaked white plumage, and I looked at it, not believing what I was seeing, and the sores stopped at that line, not seeping into the other 2 sections where the feathered wings and the crooked neck lay limp. And the putrid smell, it was even worse than the sight of this poor creature. A rancid, rotting smell that clung to my nose, and in my haste to close that basket, I saw the marks on the basket interior, lines, a bloody tally scattered around the dead swan, and I started to count them, but I saw that some were beneath the carcass, and I reached out my shaking, plighted hands to lift its neck, forcing my teeth into my gums as I did it, trying my best to count them as quickly as I could, but unable to block out that discomfort and the pain. I will save you the strife. There is a tally of 30 beneath each section, a separate tally for each of the curses. Aoife said behind me, this coldness to her quiet words, and I turned to her and I managed to croak out, "Save them. Save my brothers." And she tilted her head and she whispered, "What is done cannot be undone. This deed is done, and as such each curse will last for 30 days. Let's see how much your father loves you when you are all wrought with fear and he with guilt." And she returned the basket beneath the floorboards and then turned and left. I wanted to scream at her, to hurt her, like she'd hurt us, but I didn't have the hatred or the energy in me to do this, and I wasn't going to let her turn me into someone like her. The pain petrified my young brothers, and their young minds were unable to comprehend why this was happening. She could curse us all, but she would never stop me from protecting my brothers. So that's what I did. For 30 days and for 30 nights, I cradled them in my arms and I tried to comfort them in their pain. Father could barely stand to be around us. As soon as he had learned the truth, he made Aoife leave at once, before he harmed her like she had harmed us. She told him that he must endure the pain of seeing us suffer because he could never love her enough. That pain was so unbearable, but worse than that was watching the distress of my brothers. Once I woke to find Owen scraping his arm against the wall, a trail of blood staining the wall and the floor all around him, and I grabbed his arms to make him stop and I cradled him in my arms, and all the while he cried out. I just wanted to make it go away. As the 30th day came to an end, I looked at my brother's sores and I hoped that they would fade away. It was Connor who spotted it first. He ran to me, the first time that he was able to that month, and he showed me his legs. The sores that had just that morning had been oozing. They now looked faded and dull on his skin. I looked at my own fading sores, and remembering the basket beneath the floorboard containing the swan, I rushed toward it. As soon as I lifted the floorboard, that rancid smell hit me, and through it all, I felt guilty for leaving the basket there while my father slept in that room. I felt the change in myself, and I knew I must act quickly. I pulled open the lid and I scanned my eyes over that rotting swan and the hind section of it that had been covered in sores and welts, not just dull white feathers. And I looked over the sections, not noticing any changes at first. And I don't know when Father appeared behind me, but I felt his breath mark the room. I looked at him, and I was about to explain the swan. She did this, he said. His voice was solemn, and as I nodded, he pointed at the swan and he said, "It's I." I saw that look of horror on his face and did not want to look. I should have looked while I still could, as suddenly my eyes began to burn. A niggling sensation that soon raged into something more. Darkness found me, a burning darkness with no light, only pain. I was blind. Father told me he had seen the swan's eye glow red. It was the same red glow that he had seen in my eyes, even though I only saw darkness. My brothers screamed and wailed, not understanding how their pain had lifted only to be replaced with something far worse. I made Father lead me to them, and I grabbed them in my arms, and the pain burned like a relentless fever, but I did my best to care for them, to make them forget about this new pain. And darkness, with soothing songs and gentle words, 30 days and for 30 nights. Burning darkness took its toll on us all. I struggled to stay strong, to find the will to carry on, but I knew I must. They were as helpless as hatchlings, afraid and helpless in their nest of pain. I had to protect them from the darkness. I had to be strong for my brothers. On the 30th day, as the burning faded and my vision slowly came back, a blur at first, I rejoiced with my brothers. But then I gulped in dread at what awaited us. I went out to the shed where Father had put that basket containing the swan, and we looked together, watching as its glowing red eye simmered into black. I looked at the middle section, knowing whatever was going to happen, it would happen within those bloody lines. The waiting was agonizing, and I clung to my father. Both of us were shaking in fear. And then an insect the size of a beetle crawled over the swan's wing, its shell a shimmer of black and its legs in abundance. I kept on watching, unable to look away, as something seemed to move beneath the swan's plumage of rotting feathers. More of these insects burst free, scurrying across the swan's middled, mangled wings and body in a blanket of black. The insects didn't move into another section. They didn't cross the bloody red lines. I thought my eyes were deceiving me, that what I had endured for the last 60 nights had made me hallucinate, that the swan was rotting, but I was not. But it couldn't be, could it? And as I felt this itching under my skin, I made myself look at my arm, and I saw this black insect gnaw its way out of me and crawl across my skin. I let out a piercing laugh as more and more these insects wiggled beneath my skin, broke free of it, and then scurried across me. I felt like I had lost my mind, and all I could do was laugh through the horror. And then I heard my brothers scream, and I no longer cared about my own agony. I ran to them, swiping the bugs from their skin and singing to them to distract them as the insects wiggled beneath their flesh, and the insects never stopped. Once a wound healed, a new one formed as a bug wiggled free of our skin, crawling across us in its dark, iridescent haze. I got used to that sensation of wriggling, gnawing, crawling. I no longer flinched when one burst free of my cheek and crawled across my face. I only cared for my brothers and for making sure that they knew that through this torment, they were loved. Rory, who hated bugs, found it the hardest to bear. On the 10th day, I caught him sitting on the window ledge, a shaking, terrified vision with insects crawling in his hair and across his bitten red skin. He was intent on jumping, but it was father who stopped him. He had to bind him to the bed to prevent him from harming himself. His wails and his hysterical sobs were a worse torture for me than the gnawing insects. My brothers were children who had done no harm. They did not deserve this. I did not deserve this. By the 30th night, I could not sleep through the hope that this would finally end. As I woke, and I noticed that the bugs had gone, we all held on to each other and wept in relief. I never saw the basket with the swan in it again, but I saw the fire in the shed through the window. Father said that he didn't start that fire, and I believed him. And we all watched as the crimson and amber flames consumed the rotting wood, hopeful in our hearts that our pain would now be over. We never spoke of what happened again after that, but I never went a day without thinking about it. Darkness leaves its mark, and although the curses were lifted and our scars were faded, none of us ever truly recovered. My brothers carried this burden with them. They would wake in the night, and their tormented screams filling the house as they swiped at nightmare insects and itched at their sores. The relief that this was imaginary was always short-lived on the realization that the nightmares had been real. We had lived them, but we had also survived. We had survived the torment that was born from a place of spite and jealousy. It is unclear what happened to Aoife after she fled the village, or where she came from. Whether she had a relative in a neighboring town or not remains unknown, as does the true nature of who she really was, and how she came to possess such abilities. And as for Fi and her brothers, few sources exist of them, but records indicate that a man named Curran ran the public house during this time. Any further information regarding his spouses or children was not archived, but the surname matches the one that Fi used when writing her name in her journal, a journal found during excavation work on the public house, now apartments built upon secrets. Fi and her brothers underwent unfathomable torment that they did not deserve, and as such, Fi buried her account beneath the very foundations where it was endured, proving that whether seen or unseen, horror clings to life. It never fully fades away. 3 curses and 30 nights, one voice strong enough to endure. If Fi's tale haunted you too, let her know below. And for more scary horror stories, please share and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video.